Joining us now, member of the House Intelligence Committee, Democratic Congressman Jim Himes of Connecticut. Good to have you on this morning. Joe has the first question. Joe?
Hey, Congressman, thanks so much for being with us. I want to ask you what we're going to be hearing about later today, but let's back up just a little bit. I'm curious if there's any talk inside the Democratic conference about perhaps slowing down a bit, expanding out this impeachment inquiry. I know the thought originally was let's move fast. It's an open and closed case. We may get some Republicans on board here, but I mean, they've taken to spouting Vladimir Putin's talking points, Russian propaganda. So why don't Democrats take their time, expand it, and leave a record for history about how Donald Trump just may be the most corrupt president in the history of this republic?
Yeah, well, Joe, I mean, there's a couple answers to that. Number one, you were never going to get to a point where you had everything that you wanted, particularly, and remember, this is not our issue, particularly when the president has said, I will not cooperate, my people will not cooperate, they will not produce emails, they will not produce documents. That makes an investigation hard. There's no reason to believe, and remember, it took us 4 months to get a court to say that Don McGahn needs to show up, and that decision is being appealed. There's no reason to believe that if we went that route, that Donald Trump wouldn't play this out for the 4, 5, 6, a year. And of course, the key point here, Joe, is that as you've said, the evidence is really very clear now about the abuse of power and certainly about the contempt of Congress involved in what I was just talking about, saying, I don't like this impeachment, so I'm not going to cooperate. That obviously, in and of itself, is clearly a fact and an impeachable offense.
Congressman, we have the second Judiciary Committee hearing today. Can you walk us through a little bit as to what we should expect to hear? The White House has declined to participate yet again. What do you think Americans who perhaps were confused by some of what the hearing last week with some of the scholars, what do you think they're going to hear today that's going to perhaps change their mind and enforce why Democrats need to move forward with this?
Yeah, so today is going to be about the facts, right? The last hearing last week was a bunch of experts on constitutional law talking about what does impeachment mean, under what circumstances has a president committed an impeachable offense. That's all very sort of abstract and academic. Today, you're going to hear from Dan Goldman and Steve Castor on the Republican side presenting the facts of the report. No surprises, right? Because they're not going to present anything that wasn't in the actual report. But members and the counsels of both sides will have an opportunity to ask questions about those facts. My guess is that it's not a terribly good moment for the White House, and that is, of course, why I think they're not participating, because, again, the facts, you can argue about how bad it is that the president is asking a foreign leader to investigate his political opponent, but the facts are not in dispute, and so people are going to hear those facts in a way that'll bring them to life in the way that a 300-page black and white report does not.
Congressman, thus far, the American public has been witness to a sprawl of evidence that you heard on the Intelligence Committee in addition to the Mueller report. But putting it all together and thinking about it, how many counts would you like to see in any impeachment proceeding brought against the president?
Well, my guess is that you're going to see at least 2. You're going to see abuse of power, which, of course, is using that White House meeting, using military aid as leverage. That's not stuff Donald Trump or any president gets to use. Those are the assets of the American public to try to achieve a narrow personal political goal, investigate Joe Biden and his son. That's abuse of power, full stop. The second one, and I feel very, very strongly about this one, is what we were talking about before, contempt of Congress. And I have this conversation with my Republican colleagues all the time. There will be Democratic presidents down the road, and do you really want to establish a precedent where the President of the United States says, I don't like this inquiry, so I'm not going to cooperate? You agree to that, and you're basically agreeing to the elimination of the checks and balances that are such an important part of our system. Now, where it gets interesting and where I think there's going to be a debate, and I can't tell you how it comes out, is, of course, Bob Mueller tees up 10 counts of obstruction of justice. I think that's a more complicated debate because, of course, the Republicans say, yeah, but Mueller he may not have found good conduct, all this, meetings with Russians and giving polling to Russians, but he didn't find indictable